Can we turn to the update on the running cost position? And I believe that a paper has been uploaded to the website this morning to amend a page that was previously there because of some technology errors. Paul, but do you want to introduce that?
Indeed. So board members have got that. Members of the public need it. It's on the front row over there. So apologies for a slight technical glitch. This is really just for the board to note formally today some changes to the running cost estimates. The details of this were sent out to board members at the beginning of May, and you'll have had a chance to look through all of the details of those changes. But perhaps a reminder to the background to this paper before covering the changes. One of the key parameters that we have to live within is the running cost limit for the commissioning board. This was brought in obviously as part of the government's wider intent to reduce administrative cost in the public sector. And the commissioning board took the lion's share of the reduction in health running costs in order to free up as much as possible the capacity for CCGs to have the running costs that they need. So we absorbed in our original plans a 50% reduction compared to the original resources that these particular functions consumed. And obviously that's why we now have a need to construct a very lean way of operating across the national, regional and local area matrix. It's worth also pointing out that within the best part of 500 million resources that we will have, the national support centre is less than a quarter of the total resources that we've got. The bulk of that money is going into resources much closer to the CCGs and the operational part of the system in the regional offices and in particular in the area offices. So, as the paper points out, we're still in the process of finalising all of our structures, and you've heard a little bit about that in the earlier part of the meeting, finalising the structures which we're going to operate with, and therefore this is an update rather than the final story. So, if you turn to the table that you have in front of you, since February we've recognised a number of technical adjustments, and we've also assumed a variety of additional functions into the commissioning board, which together amounts to round about 120 million of additional cost pressure. Now, we've been able to cover the bulk of this by releasing some of the contingency that we took at the start of this journey, prudently as it turned out, for precisely this sort of issue, and secondly by reducing the allocation of discretionary non-pay costs that we had in the original budgets. And the remaining amount, amounting to 35 million, has been provided in the form of additional resource, effectively, or limit from the Department of Health, predominantly to recognise the much more technical aspects of the changes that I've just been talking about. As I say, the detail of this is set out in the more comprehensive document on the website and which has been sent out. But obviously Bill and I will be happy to deal with any specific issues which board members have today that they want to talk about. We'll keep you posted, obviously, as this story develops. There are two main areas of further development which are pointed out in the note. Firstly, the detailed design of national, regional and local structures will, we hope, confirm both the final shape of the organisation and, equally importantly for this purpose at least, confirm that the running cost estimates that we've put together are ones which will deliver us the quality of performance and service that we need. And secondly, as the paper says, there are a number of elements of our budget where the precise definition of how running costs will be defined is still a matter of clarification. And clearly we will work on that with some urgency because we need to get a degree of certainty about that. And again, I'll update the board as and when there are any further developments on that. So that's really all I wanted to say about the paper, unless there are any questions or observations.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions of Paul on the paper? David?
I mean, I just kind of reinforce the point that Paul made at the beginning because, and it kind of links to what I think Joe and Bill were saying about this being a new kind of organisation. It's the first time in history that the NHS has had a single organisation responsible for all of these things. And not only do we want to recognise that and get value out of it, we also want to make sure that it operates in a different way. And if you think about it, I mean, we start off by the point as if you think about all the functions we currently are going to get, we're going to and how they're done now, it's going to cost half as much. So, that is a big change in itself. And also this thing about having a relatively small national support centre to help, to support and enable the NHS, but most people being distributed. The other two things I would say about that, even in the National Support Centre, the kind of heart of the National Support Centre is the work around the domains in the outcomes framework. So clinicians in particular being involved in all of that at the centre support. And right the way through the system, you can see doctors, nurses, allied health professionals, others being engaged in that, which I think hopefully will be able to create something not only smaller and leaner, but also in terms of the way it functions, a very different way of functioning.
Thank you. Kieran.
Can I ask a question on flexibility? It's impossible to get it perfectly right first time out. And so if we find there's a pinch point here, but actually we're doing quite okay over here, what degree of freedom is within the pot?
Well, I guess there are two types of freedom, one of which is it's for us to determine if we want to change the balance of where we invest as we go forward. So that freedom is absolutely there. And I know there are pinch points that are emerging that we'll have to deal with, and we'll take those forward as we need to do so. Secondly, we have still got a contingency. I'm not minded to give up the contingency at this stage of the struggle, because we've still got a fair few months before we go into final go live. But we have a contingency. We've got a substantial amount of flexibility around the discretionary spend. So I think I can reassure you we've got enough flexibility for the moment.
Bill.
Further to that point, I think as Paul sets out, the internal flexibility is really important. We need to retain it. I think also kind of an external discipline is going to be important over the coming months. There are still discussions with different bits of the current system who would quite like us to take on additional bits of jobs or roles that they've started, which aren't currently ours, and I think the only circumstances now in which we could take anything else on would be if it fitted with what we're about, our values, but also if it's backed by the right resource, and that will be a set of discussions we'll have to keep having, I think, Paul.
Thank you. The other. Well, the board is asked to note progress on this, and I think it's fair to say that it's good to see that the increasing granularity of analysis and the shifting around of costs is now beginning to bed down, and actually really take Bill's point that we have to be very, very careful about taking on additional tasks without associated funding. And I think all of us as non-executives are very strongly encouraged by the disposition of the cost towards the local areas rather than having a significant cost in the centre. So with that, thank you very much, Paul.